Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. I am intentionally wearing this jacket because the guy I'm speaking to, one of the first times that we talked, we shared our mutual affinity for the Cincinnati Bengals. He is in Cincinnati. I grew up a Bengals fan. I've always been a Bengals fan, been a Reds fan all my life. And it's because we are in the home market of the Reds and Bengals. But this guy is actually in the home of the Reds and Bengals. He runs a company called Speaking CPR. And he can help you or anybody that you know be a certified and influential podcaster. Did I get that right, Michael?
Absolutely. I can help you get your message out and stand out from the crowd because it's all based on your stories.
Well, Michael may have to actually perform real CPR by the time we get done here with this conversation. But Michael Davis joins me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Michael, good morning, man. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing very well. Thank you, Brian. And I think I was laughing because you were mentioning our affinity and our shared pain as Bengals and Reds sports fans over the years.
You know, I always tell people, Michael, you can't help your raisins.
Nope.
My dad took me to and I talk about this in my new book, People Buy From People. My dad and mom took me to my first Reds game when I was 5 in Riverfront Stadium. It was 1977. And, of course, my dad told me that he said, you know, you watched the 72 World Series with me. I said, yeah, I don't remember that. I was 2 months old when the Reds and the Oakland Athletics played in the 70s. Now, I do remember vividly the 1990 World Series because I was a senior in high school that year, transitioning to my freshman year of college, and that was my team. In fact, if I would show you, and Michael has seen them, my Nasty Boys bobblehead. Those are my guys, Rob Dibble, Norm Charlton, and Randy Myers. But, man, I could talk all day about our mutual affinity. I want to start here with you today, Michael, in this conversation. What are you hearing from some businesses that are having those CPR moments now? When I talk about CPR moments, I mean those moments that can cause a heart attack internally with business. Because when I think of CPR, I think of the term CPR. Mm-hmm. We think of the term cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Because this pandemic has caused businesses to have those moments of arrest, of just, you know, clutching the chest, if you will. How are you speaking to businesses, and what are you talking to businesses about when those type of things come to you and they say, Michael, we need help getting our message out even greater to a higher degree?
Well, there are two areas that I'm seeing, Brian. First of all, when it all hit the fan back in March, intuitively, instinctively, I knew that people were going to be struggling with getting online. I was fortunate in that I've been doing online presenting, coaching, emceeing for 3 years before COVID. So I knew the power of it, and I'd been encouraging people, get online, it's the wave, it's the future. And as of March, it's not the future, it's the now. So they struggled with that huge transition. I mean, when you're used to sitting across from people and talking, communicating, standing in front of a group and speaking, it is a huge shift. And that's not just because you're looking at a camera. If you think about this, one of my mentors taught me that online dulls the senses. Mm-hmm. What he means is if you and I are sitting across from the lunch table, we're talking about our sports, the Bengals and Reds, I can see you. I can feel the temperature in the room. I can hear all the noise going on. I can hear you. I can smell the scents. I can even taste if there's food around. All those senses are triggered. With what you and I are doing right now, 3 of those senses are just shut down. Mm-hmm. I can see only what your camera allows me to see, and I can only hear your microphone. And when we're on these group meetings, most of the time people are muted. That's a big struggle that people just weren't used to. It's like overnight, we had to do a complete shift. Now, with that said, what I have to remind people is that the keys to effective presenting have not changed. We still have to have a central message. We have to have stories that help sell the ideas that we're trying to sell. We have to open in a creative way that gets people's attention, and we have to keep their attention from start to finish, and then close with a call to action. That hasn't changed. So I have to remind them that yes, it's a different format, but the message is essentially still the same.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, here's the thing that I think is important in that as well too, is people that were never used to being online in an online present setting. It takes a different mindset. It takes a different functionality. I would tell people all the time with this podcast, if I could go back to February or March as I was preparing to do this podcast, if I knew then what I know now, I would have started where I am right now.
Right.
I would have started with a killer webcam. I would have started with a really, really good microphone. I would have probably bought a higher processing laptop. And not saying that I've had to grow into those things. I know now what I know now. I've become proficient at it. But it takes time for people to become proficient. When you think about proficiency in delivering an online message, how important is proficiency, and is it greater than the message itself?
I don't think it's greater than the message itself. And by the way, that's an excellent question. I haven't heard that before. Here's the thing: message has to be central to what we're talking about. I see people, coaches who are talking about your delivery style. What do you do with gestures and all that?
And let me jump in there. The reason that I asked the question is that I don't want to piggyback off of what you just said. You can have the greatest message in the world.
Yeah.
But if you don't have the proficiency and nobody can hear it or understand it or be proficient enough to get that out to a greater audience, then really your message becomes stifled. And that's why I asked the question, is proficiency greater? I love what you said there, though. The message has still got to be the central theme. So let me pivot just slightly, if I can go a different way with that question.
Sure.
What is the most important thing to messaging that people fail to realize about messaging?
It has to be clear, concise, and short. Clear and concise.
Unlike that last question I asked.
That's the problem. The people that I've worked with, my coaches have worked with, they have so much to say. They're trying to jam too much in. And when they do that, their message isn't clear. We don't know why we're listening. And it may be entertaining. We'll remember it for about 5 seconds after they're done, and then we're on to the next thing. Think about, and I use this example a lot, think about 1963. A man stands in front of the Lincoln Memorial and gives a speech to about 250,000 people. His message was so clear. I have a dream.
Yeah.
57 years later, those of us, I was in diapers when he gave that. You weren't born, but you instantly know what it means.
Yeah.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Yeah. Where's the beef?
Yeah. Where's the beef? Ask not what you can do if you can. Where's the beef work? Because it was simple and we knew exactly what it meant.
Yeah.
Even if you weren't alive then.
Have a Coke and a smile.
Yep.
That was one I will say this. Growing up a Bengals fan, the last person I wanted to tell me to have a Coke and a smile and throw me their jersey was Mean Joe Green.
That's right.
I would have wanted Kenny Anderson to throw me his jersey, or Pete Johnson, or Dan Ross, or Dave Lapham. Now I'm really pontificating on old time Jim Breach on old time Bengals. But yeah, that is brilliant, Michael, what you just said. The message has long-lasting resonance. It still resonates 57 years later. Mm-hmm. Do you think it was, and let's talk for just a minute about Dr. King's I have a dream speech.
Mhm.
Was it in its resonance, in its ability to be sustaining? Was it the duration of the message? What do you think has caused the longevity of that message and similar messages to still, to your point, 57 years later, still have the instant mind recognition whenever we hear those words put together, that instantly comes to mind? What do you think makes that so resonating for a long period of time?
I think, well, first of all, because it ties into his dream was racial equality, being just having a fair shot. And that still resonates today because we have so much turmoil, and there's still parts of our country that aren't getting fair treatment on a consistent basis. But I think it also taps into, we all have a dream. We have our own dreams. You and I, we have career dreams, family dreams, dreams that someday we'll see our team win a Super Bowl. I mean, I'm not trying to make light of it, but we all have those aspirations, and that's such a simple phrase. And the challenge I see is so many people try to make it too complicated.
Hey, listen, we're going to see a Super Bowl in our lifetime. There's a guy named Joseph Lee Burrow that's going to help get us there, man. Yes. Have faith, my brother. Have faith.
I shall. But we overcomplicate our messages. Keep them simple. And people think, well, I've got all this knowledge. I got to jam it into this short time I have with you. No, you don't. The purpose of a speech, a sales presentation, a presentation to your group, it's not to give them your whole knowledge. It's to give them some inspiration, some hope, a new way of thinking about life so that they want more. You're not providing all the answers. You're just opening their minds up.
Well, and you know, Michael, we feel like, I think a lot of times people get lost in the weeds of, I've got to deliver the perfect message. Mm-hmm. I have got to be perfect because I'm trying to cut through the modicum of noise. I'm trying to cut through the amount of noise that's out there and have my voice be distinctively heard. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, you know, here's where I want to go with this thought. A lot of times we will take and we'll say, I have got to make the message so unique, and I've got to spin it in such a way that it's going to indelibly impress. It's going to be so absurd that by its absurdity, it's going to stick here. And a lot of times that's really not what you want to do. A lot of times it's the simplest, heartfelt, straight to the point messages that really have that long lasting resonance.
True. It is a big challenge. A lot of people I talk to, and I focus a lot on storytelling, will tell me, well, I haven't done anything. I haven't climbed the big mountains. I haven't won Olympic gold. I haven't overcome a major surgery or illness.
Yeah.
And my point to them is, guess what? Neither have most of the people you're talking to.
No, great point.
Great point. Yeah, I mean, let's go back to sports for a moment. It connected us immediately. Our joys, our frustrations. I mean, it's why sports is such a great connector, because people have those shared experiences. But if you have kids, if you have a business, if you're online struggling with presentations, you have something in common with most people right now. And commonality is what connects us, not perfection. In fact, if you are a perfect presenter, a perfect speaker, you're turning people off.
So how does one, let me ask you this. What is the most common mistake that people make in their online presence? Because you mentioned it a few minutes ago, and I kind of hung on what you said there, and I wanted to follow up with that. And now's a good time to do that. You mentioned that you started to see this shift about 3 years ago. You started mentioning to people, now's the time to really build this online presence. Now's the time to do that. What was it? Let me go here. I was going to go in another direction, but let me go here instead. What was it that you saw in the marketplace as a whole that caused your thinking to go, now is the time to begin to ramp to that? Was there a specific thing that you saw or a series of things? What was it that really tripped your mind, Michael?
Well, I work with a group of coaches that we have a weekly online coaching session with them. And that was, I guess it's really going back 4 years. We were doing those, and I was seeing how we were getting people all over the world. And I thought, well, this is fantastic because we're no longer limited geographically to having to do business or talk with people within 50 to 100 miles of us. We can help people literally globally. And we do every week. We're talking to people in India, Australia, China, the United States, Boise, Idaho. I mean, it's everywhere. So I saw that it was a more efficient way of conducting business. In some of the networking groups that I was part of, I kept telling them, you don't have to set up one-to-one meetings where you get in your car, you drive 20 minutes, meet, come back. I said, let's do online. And I got a lot of resistance until March.
Well, and I would have to think that people would say, well, Michael, that's not the way we've always done it. We've always done it this way. We've been... And I'll tell you this, in working from home, that's been one of the biggest struggles that I've had is I've always been a very social person. I've always had a field-based role. And I've always been out in the field and doing this and that. And it's an adjustment. When you saw that and you said, hey, look, I'm getting these guys together, because you could have 5 or 6 people in an online meeting. You could be in Cincinnati. I could be in West Virginia. You mentioned Boise. And then you could tag in people from England, Australia, India, Russia, wherever. I had a gentleman on my podcast that will release here in a couple of weeks. We recorded the podcast. He was in Chiang Mai, Thailand.
Yeah.
Thousands of miles across there. I mean, if I would get in an airplane right now, it's easily a 2-day flight to where he is.
Right.
But now, to your point, and to a brilliant point you made, now we have really shrunk time and distance. And from an efficiency standpoint, it's been great. What was the one unintended benefit that you saw from this? You were like, it caused you to have a V8 moment, like, man, I didn't think of that, or I didn't see that as being an unintended benefit of what we were trying to do.
Excellent. I haven't thought of that. I think it's just the
See what the Bengals jacket does. It's like
brings this brilliance out of it.
Right. It's like, it's like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the robe. You just put it on and immediately, I feel like Zach Taylor. I feel like I'm just calling the perfect game right now.
That's right. I know what the unintended consequence is, that it completely leveled the playing field in my industry. Professional speakers who've been doing this for 30, 40 years, leaders, basically the rules all got reset in March of this year. Some professional speakers who have to be in front of a crowd, they're that extroverted, they're getting out of it. They can't deal with this. So if you're brand new to the speaking world, if you're even in sales, leadership, this is the best opportunity that we will see in our lifetimes to catch up to people who are way ahead of you. Maybe even get ahead of them because they're struggling to undo a lot of old rules. Whereas we're coming in with this technology saying, yeah, I'm used to this. And by the way, we are never going back to 100% live meetings, presentations, speeches. We're going to, but the word that I've been hearing for 2 months, and I agree, is hybrid.
Well, the reason being is that you can either spend thousands of dollars bringing everyone together with flights, hotels, meals, a conference venue, or you can take that investment and you can say, I want the very best webcam whoever makes it on the marketplace. And I want the very best microphone, whoever makes that on the marketplace. And for less money than you can do those things in that setting, maybe you meet 2 or 3 times a year in one of those big settings like that, conference settings. You can now outfit your team with that and save money.
Sure.
You can give your team the very best of the best and still save money. And I agree with you. And maybe that's not what you were looking for with an answer. The first thing that leapt to my mind was cost reduction.
Absolutely. That was the unintended consequence of companies who have been resisting having people work from home because they thought, well, they're not going to be as efficient. They'll be distracted. Now, in the early days of COVID, companies saw their productivity go through the roof because people had nothing better to do. They were just desperate. They were afraid they would lose their jobs. Now,
let me say this, and
Sure.
if you don't mind me jumping in there.
Oh, go ahead.
I commented on a post on LinkedIn because someone was talking about the commercial real estate market out in California. And I said, the reason that you'll have some companies that will go to a work from home model for a portion or a larger portion of their workforce is, think of the two things that companies have that are fixed costs that with a building, they don't have now. If they close a building down, they have saved money on not only the lease of that building, but also the utilities, the electric, the water, if they provided coffee and things like that in areas of the building, they can now shift those. They can get rid of all those expenses because guess what companies don't reimburse for when you work from home? They're not going to reimburse you for your electricity. They're not going to reimburse you for your water. They're not going to reimburse you for other utilities, maybe natural gas if you have it, or some type of heat or things like that. They'll reimburse you for internet because it's an essential. Most companies will reimburse for internet, but those other utility expenses that could have been large in a budget that companies said, well, it's just a part of doing business. It's a fixed cost of doing business. Now those things start to go away because now they've shifted to some degree. They've shifted those costs back over to the employees. And now the employees go, well, now I have to create my own workspace from home. So maybe now they're having to renovate or remodel their home to create this space. It actually, Michael, I didn't mean to jump in there, but as you were talking, it made me think companies will see what they may have lost or maybe fearing that they'll lose in productivity. They'll actually add it back to the bottom line with these savings in utilities and other things that employees are now taking on. So I love what you said there. And I think it was really, really insightful. And I love what you said. I want to go back for just a moment to the leveling of the playing field, the parity now that has happened with speakers. Let me move it forward just a tad. What can someone do to improve their presence online? So now the playing field's even. So now you have the same opportunities that someone else who does speaking for a living. Maybe you don't do speaking for a living. Maybe it's something you do on the side. Maybe it's something that you've wanted to do, but you're not quite at the levels of those people. What you just said is now everybody's on a level playing field. So how does someone take what they do and take it to that next level and kind of get to that point where they start to rise above where everybody else is?
The key is do not treat presenting to a camera the same way you do presenting to a group of people. You have to change it. We call it pace elements. If you're going to give a 20 to 30 minute talk, for example, and you don't have to be a professional speaker. It could be you just got for your group. You have to give a presentation. I mean, we're all doing this now. You cannot look at a camera for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
On the other end, you can't just throw up a bunch of slides. That's the worst thing you can do because you know what people are doing on the other end if you're just throwing up slides. They're checking email. They're doing everything but watching.
Probably eating a bagel like I have next to me now.
Exactly. Well, they are. But we have to, and come to think of it, before we end this, I'll give your listeners access to a complimentary report. It's about how do you present online. There are 28 pace elements we talk about that just change it up. It could be something as simple as use questions in a chat and have them answer in the chat box. Bring people on live having questions. You can do polls. Show slides, but do not fill them with verbiage. Just trigger words. Show images, show videos. I'm a big fan of doing what I call hot seat coaching. because this is what I do. And to help promote my business and to show how I do what I do, I coach people live on calls, and it is the best source of business I have in this environment.
You're really, because you're really making them stay engaged. And that's the biggest thing, Michael, is that, companies say, well, what about engagement? What about engagement? What about engagement?
Yeah.
People are riveted to things that are riveting. People say, and that's why, and in full disclosure for those that are going to hear this episode, that's why I've taken a little longer route with the podcast, because I think good conversation continues to draw people in, and they want to stay involved in good conversation.
Yes.
They want to stay engaged in good conversation. It's why, folks, that I don't send questions beforehand. I didn't send Michael any questions, because good conversation just happens naturally, and people want to stay engaged in really good conversation. It's why talk radio is so successful. It's why a lot of those platforms are very successful. You may not like Rush Limbaugh, but what he does very well is he engages his listeners for 3 hours.
Yes.
His listeners go, if I miss a minute, I'm going to miss something.
Yeah.
He's extremely engaging in keeping that audience focused for 3 hours. You know how hard it is? Because, even we've been talking sports. Even at times, there will be times during a game that I want to watch. I won't watch every play. I won't watch every play that happens. If somebody is kicking the ball off, it's kickoff. Likely they're going to down it. But someone, to your point, Michael, I love that hot seat mentality and that thinking of the content just needs to be full of things that rivet, that engage, that resonate. Man, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. We'll mention that complimentary report there at the end.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. You just made me think of something, Brian. Last year, I was watching a football game, and it just occurred to me how often the camera angles were changing. So just for the heck of it, I went on YouTube, and I found a game from the 80s, and I was watching it. It was almost like a different planet. If you go back and for all your listeners, and it's not just sports, even TV shows, go back and watch how the camera used to stay on a player for several seconds. Let's say after an incomplete pass, he'd be running back to the huddle. You get maybe a second of camera attention on that player before they're going to the coaches, they're going to the stands. We have become conditioned to things changing so fast that our presentations have to do the same thing, or else people are going to get distracted. That's the biggest challenge we have as online presenters.
Did you notice one thing you didn't see? Did you notice two pieces that you didn't see when you watched that clip?
Oh, it wasn't full of information around the edge of the screen.
There you
with
go.
Scores and everything else.
Yes. Yeah. So, and they've done that is because to some degree, the TV, the companies, the ESPNs, the Foxes, the ABC, CBS, NBC that broadcast those things know at some point in time, the attention span, even of fans, is not that long. And at any point that if someone jumps out of that game and jumps back into that game, they can jump right back into that game by seeing the score on the bottom of the screen and seeing how much time's left in the quarter, what quarter it is, and what down it is. They know that people can jump in and out very quickly. And something else you didn't see, and we're used to it, go back and watch a game. And I think I love what you brought up there, the differences between then and now. Watch a football game that didn't have a first down marker.
Yeah, it's true.
Back then.
Yeah.
Because, now you go, well, every game, you can watch a high school game online, and at some point they're superimposing the first down line. Mm-hmm. It's the line to gain that the offensive team has to get to. I love what you said there about the way it changed. So I've got to ask one last question before we tell your story. Where do we go from here? When someone says in 2025, and we're looking at the way we're doing things in 2020, you and I are talking over Zoom. Where do you see in the next 5 years that we'll go back and look at a recording from this year and we'll go, man, how things have changed in 5 years?
I'm always leery of predictions because in the world we're talking about,
how many times have we said, man, the Bengals are going to the Super Bowl, the Reds are going to the World Series? Yeah. But no, I want to ask that because you said something really insightful there about watching a game. The 80s were not that long ago. I mean, it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But the way time is moving, it wasn't that long ago. So let me ask the question differently. How can people present online today that will still lead them to be as effective as they are 5 years from now? Are there principles that they can use that are sustaining principles that will sustain through any technology cycle?
Yeah, it does come back to the fact that you have to have a message, support it with stories, because stories are the great connector. We've been telling stories all the way back to our earliest ancestors. That's how we passed on our history, our lessons, our morals, keep ourselves out of danger. So those have to be at the core. We have to have a reason for people to listen to us. We have to give them a call to action. Mm-hmm. How do we want them to think, feel, or act differently? One thing that occurs to me 5 years in the future, Brian, it's 2025. My guess is we're going to have much more interactive presentations. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know what kind of technology is on the horizon, but I think people will be much more involved in presentations. It will be less of one speaker. It'll be groups. We'll have them involved. I think we're going to see that in the movie industry too. I've even heard people say, or read articles that talked about that we might be able to go to movies where we can choose which ending we want. So there's going to be more viewer choice. But it all comes back to you have to have those key elements, and you have to practice and rehearse. There is no doubt, especially online. But what's great about Zoom is I can go put together a presentation. I can go practice it, record it on Zoom. Nobody has to be on the other end, and I can go back and watch it and find what's working, what's not, and I also get feedback on it. But yeah, I think there's just going to be an ongoing increase in the amount of audience interaction in presentations going forward.
Man, that is so good. Let's dive into your story. You've got an interest. I was reading a little bit of your bio, and you talk about, and I want you to take me back as early as you can and as you want to. You really have a heartfelt story about how you got into public speaking, and so take the audience as far back as you want to go from point A to point B and tell your story.
My journey to what I do today started on a desk back in 1969. It was late in the year.
I still wasn't born yet. So
you weren't even born. Yeah. It was a fall afternoon. The rain was hitting the windows, and all the lights were off in Mrs. North's first grade class. It was nap time. All the kids were resting their heads on their desk, all but one. That would be me. I was standing on my desk because I had broken a class rule earlier that day. The rule I had broken was during lunchtime, it was raining, kids were bored, and I was a huge fan of the Apollo space program. And Neil Armstrong had just taken his giant leap for mankind. So I was going to be the next astronaut on the
Ohio native.
Absolutely. So during lunch, nothing going on. I got bored. I jumped up on my desk, and I was having a ball, flying to the moon, until Mrs. North walked into the classroom and said, well, since you love standing on your desk so much, Michael, we're going to let you do it during nap time so everybody can see you. So there I'm standing on that desk, dark room, rain hitting the windows, and the longer I stood, all I could think was, please let me get off this desk. Please, because all my classmates were just silently taunting me. They were pointing fingers, sticking their tongues out, all that. Now, this was 51 years ago. I don't know exactly how long I was on that desk, but I do know that when Mrs. North said, you can get down now, I hope you've learned your lesson, I thought, yeah, don't ever stand in front of people again. That was awful.
Mm-hmm.
So for the next 25 years, I pretty much did just that. When I was in 6th grade, I loved music. I wanted to join the band, but I realized people would be watching me. When I was in high school, I thought I'd love to join the drama club, loved acting, but then I realized, there would be people in the audience looking at me. Even in college, some buddies and I had thought about doing open mic night. People really would laugh at me there. And I just had all these activities, experiences I would have liked to have had, but that fear of being looked at and taunted and humiliated, it was like I was still on that desk. And then in October of 1994, I had become a certified financial planner. Part of my job was to go out and give retirement planning workshops in the community. So one day my boss calls me into his office. He hands me a stack of papers and says, read this. These are the evaluations from your last workshop. And I thought, these have got to be good. I mean, I killed it. I had all these slides. I gave him all the information I had. I just threw the kitchen sink at him. I just wanted him to be educated. And I looked down, Brian, at the first one, and it said, way too much information for this event. Okay. Looked at the next one. Does this guy ever take a breath? Guy talks too fast. I couldn't keep up. Guy moves around too much. I mean, it was just one after another after another. And I finally stopped and I looked at my boss. I said, Joe, is there anything good in here? Should I keep going? He said, oh, yeah, there's one. There's a good one. Keep going. So I thumbed through it, and sure enough, there it was. Mike has nice hair. I said, that's it? He said, yeah,
you do
that's
have
it.
good hair, Mike.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, here's the thing. If you do not fix this problem, we're going to let you go. Part of your job when we hired you, you said you could get people in the door through these workshops, and it's not happening. You need to fix this or else. That was the day that my fear of losing my job was greater than my fear of standing in front of people and being humiliated. Now, that led me to an organization called Toastmasters International, which eventually led me to the National Speakers Association. And the most important lesson I learned early on, Brian, was that public speaking is like any other skill. It is learnable. I thought you were born that way or you weren't, and it's not true. Some of the greatest speakers on the planet are introverts who had horrible, much worse than I did, experiences of public humiliation and embarrassment.
You know, Michael, I want to jump in there because sure. I had a friend of mine on, Tom Ziegler. His dad, Zig Ziglar, was a legendary speaker.
Yeah.
And Tom said something to me one time. He said, Brian, he said, I thought that when people had me come to speak, they wanted me to be my dad.
Oh.
They were expecting me to be dad. And he said that was internal to me. No, he said they wanted to hear Tom. They didn't want to hear, they loved and respected Zig,
right?
But they wanted to hear Tom. How long, Michael, did it take you to find Michael and to find the voice that you had and to find the skill that worked for you and knowing that that was your unique value proposition that you could add in those situations? Did it take you a period of time, or did you have one of those moments you go, this is what I do well, I just need to ramp it up?
It was both. It took me 7 years from the day I joined Toastmasters in 94 to a day in 2001. I was under the impression.
So you were not an overnight success. So nope. and I want to jump in there because I think a lot of people, Michael, and I love what you said. I had to piggyback off of that because I think a lot of people, and I see this around a lot of younger people, they want to do something and have instant success because we can go to a restaurant We can pull through in our car. We can speak into the menu. And in 5 minutes or less, we've got food. We've got hot food and we're ready to go. We have become, we trade cell phones because they become too slow. We just are a society of instantaneous success. It took you 7 years. And I want to emphasize that. Take me through your mindset through that time. Did you feel like, is this going to come together? What were you feeling through that time from 94 to 2001 as you were going through this process?
Looking back, I didn't see it at the time. I was very insecure and did not trust that I had anything worth saying. So to compensate for that, I became a, quote, polished speaker, which meant that the hair was always perfectly brushed, the suit was perfect, the shoes were shined, I had the professional appearance, and I memorized everything word for word. And people would say to me, oh, you're so polished. And I wore that as a badge of honor until one day in 2001 when I walked into a Toastmasters meeting. And long and short of it is nobody showed up that day basically to speak who was scheduled, and they were desperate to have somebody talk. So I said, yeah, I'll do it, even though everything inside of me was saying, don't, you're going to look foolish. You're not even dressed the part. You haven't memorized it. So I got up and I gave this speech about 7 minutes long, sat down and started berating myself. I'm like, that was awful. This is going to be the worst evaluation you've ever had. Why would you even do that to yourself? So my friend Chris gets up. He gives me some feedback. If you're not familiar with Toastmasters, in a meeting, you give a speech and then you get some feedback, which is very helpful. It's one of the strengths of the organization. He gives me some constructive feedback. He said, you did this well. You could improve here. And just as he turned to walk away to finish his evaluation, he said, oh, by the way, I don't know what you did differently today, but I have never seen you be more authentic and real.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah.
And that was, and I hate cliches, but that was a light bulb moment. It said, wait a minute, you don't have to go up there perfectly presenting. And that's when I finally understood what it meant to be an authentic presenter. It'd be willing to share your struggles, your strife, your setbacks, your scars, because that's what connects us to people. Now, since then, I have a can of furniture polish I keep in my office as a reminder to never be polished. Because when you're polished, nothing sticks to polish, right?
Yeah.
Which means no message sticks. No, you don't connect with people. Be yourself. And this is hard. You got to trust that the journey you've been on, the lessons you've learned will help others, and they will. And people don't want you to be perfect. Don't be perfect online. I've given over 500 online presentations, workshops, coaching calls. And whenever I do an online workshop about online presenting, the first thing I tell them is, you are going to make mistakes every single time. Get over it, right? Mm-hmm. That's not why people are there. They don't want you to be perfect. They want you to give them a message, hope, something that's going to make their lives a little bit better. They're not going to talk about the mistakes unless you make a big deal of it and you give them nothing else to talk about.
Well, it's the dog barking in the background that you think you got put away, and it's the light that falls that you thought you had perfectly placed and you're shining it down on yourself. People embrace those moments because, to your point, it connects them. They say, yeah, my dog barks. Or,
absolutely.
The light's falling, the light's falling on me. I remember a time, and my son and I, my 20-year-old, we were talking about this the other day. I was in church getting ready to go to the keyboard, and I took a different route. It was real narrow. My foot got caught, and I tipped the keyboard over and fell down. And I just looked at my pastor. He was looking at me. I just went,
what do you, yeah.
And he told me, he said, you know what? He said, when I'm having a bad day, I think about those moments. I think about that moment. And he said, I start laughing. And it was embarrassing. My wife was just like, oh, can I hide under the pew or something like that? But I love what you said there about authentic, connectable moments.
Mhm.
Those imperfect moments, Michael, really tend to bring people together. I want to go here for just a second with you. Thinking about your career and those imperfect moments, what was the greatest obstacle that you overcame? And what was the lesson that you took from it?
My own insecurity and a lack of self-worth. I realized that, first of all, it took me a long time to figure out, but I was a certified financial planner for 29 years, and I was good at that. I didn't love it. And it wasn't until I got into coaching and presentations that I realized I found my calling. I found what I'm supposed to be doing, because I know the pain of not being able to stand in front of a group and present, or getting bad evaluations, except about the hair, of course. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I know that pain. I know the regret. I still regret at some small level not playing an instrument in elementary school, not going out for acting in drama club. I'll always carry that. I don't want people to go through that same regret, that pain. And I can help them. My superpower, if you will, is I can reach inside of people and pull those stories out that connect them with themselves, first of all, to give them that confidence to help find that true voice, and then use that to inspire other people. Because if there was ever a time in my lifetime where people needed to be inspired and have hope, it sure feels like it right now.
Hey, I'm a superhero to my family. My wife calls me Captain Moron sometimes. So, I
There
mean,
you
it's,
go. Captain Smart Aleck. So
yeah, exactly. Or Captain Obvious, it's one of those,
that's
it's
right.
it's one of those three. I love what you said there about insecurity, because I think to some degree, and I was kidding with my son one day. I showed him, there's a famous clip from Saturday Night Live where Al Franken's playing a character called, his name was Stuart Smalley, and it was called Daily Affirmations.
Mm-hmm.
And he has Michael Jordan, who at the time was just the most dominant basketball player on the planet.
Yeah.
And he has Michael Jordan look into the mirror and say, "Okay, Mike, now we'll talk." And Michael Jordan goes, "I'm good enough. I'm smart enough. And doggone it, people like me." But that's the thing is, Michael, we get in our own way sometimes through insecurity. We think to ourselves, am I good enough? Am I smart enough? And do people like me? Do I present myself well? Do I really make resonance? Am I consistent? And, those questions of insecurity that come to mind. I want to bring our conversation home with this. I want you to leave the audience with your biggest piece of intentional encouragement, whether it be around that or around anything else that you want to say to the audience to intentionally encourage them.
I think in the times that we're in, there's so much strife, there's so much anger and anxiety. I believe that if every one of us was forced to sit down with somebody who didn't look like us, think like us, and listen to their story for 5 minutes, and then share our story for 5 minutes, it would be a lot less stressful world. We would see people as we really are underneath the surface, that 99.9% of the planet wants the same thing.
Yeah.
But we get caught up in the politics or the ethnic differences or the cultural differences, and we've gone too tribal. Mm-hmm. We're reverting back to how our ancestors were 5,000 years ago. And that's not the modern society that has evolved. And if we don't get past that, we're going to continue to have problems. And I think, again, solutions can often be very simple. It starts with taking the time to listen to one another.
Yeah.
Not listen as in, okay, hurry up, I got something to say. No, really shut down everything in your head and just listen and learn about what this person is about. And you're going to find that you have much more in common than you do differently. I just happen to be blessed to be in a field where I get to work with people all the time, helping them pull those stories out. And I've learned so much about cultures, people. I've worked with people on 4 continents. I've seen so many different perspectives that it's changed how I view the world.
Yeah. Well, and I've said this too, and again, forgive me, I have to piggyback off of this. The greatest relationships are always cultivated in common ground.
Mm-hmm.
When you can cultivate relationships in common ground, that's where the most fertile soil is for those relationships, is there in common ground. Man, this has been such a fun conversation. You teased it earlier, so now I wrote it down so that I can ask you about it. You have a complimentary report for folks that can help them improve their online presence. Tell them about it, Michael.
Yeah, actually, I've got 3, and they can pick. I'll send all 3 complimentary. One is called "Help! I Have to Present Online. Now What?" It just gives some tips on how to best present, how you should set up your physical environment, how you should sound, and how to keep things minimalist but powerful. The second is a series of 28 what we call PACE elements. How can you change up those online presentations to keep people interested? And also I have something called 52 storytelling tips. So I'm happy to send you all those. The 52 tips is a weekly 5-minute audio that gets sent right to your email address. It just builds one tip on top of another. The most important point I want to make whenever I'm on a podcast is I get how people get spammed to death when they sign up for something free. My promise to you is if you sign up for those 3, you're not going to get bombarded additionally. I just want to help people get out, become more effective online, to become better storytellers. If you want to follow up with me and ask questions, that's fine, but I'm not going to chase you down with, and definitely not bombard you with spam. But you can just write to me at mike@speakingcpr.com. I'll get those over to you and answer any questions you have.
That's mike@speakingcpr.com.
Yes, sir.
You can connect with him, on LinkedIn at Michael Davis. And again, encourage you to do that. We'll link those complimentary reports in the show notes. So
Yeah,
we'll get those from Michael, and we'll link those in that way you can, as you want to, consume as much of his content as you want to or not want to. That's the beautiful thing. And I love what you said there as we end this, is that, it's there. You give the content, and if people want it, great. It's there to help them. So
exactly.
Michael Davis, this has been a blast, man. This has been such a fun conversation. Thank you for joining me today on the Intentional.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Brian. Enjoyed it.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through His Word. And until next time, remember, everyone, everywhere, at any time, and any place, can be an intentional